I've spoken a lot lately about the great gulf that exists now between what we knew about the COVID-19 virus back in early March and what we know now. We've used the last 6 months, as I've said a number of times, to learn and figure out how we can do a better job of defeating this virus, to prepare ourselves, to prepare our health care institutions. We've taken the time to build stockpiles of personal protective equipment to make sure that we're ready if and when a resurgence happens. We've ramped up our testing efforts. We've ramped up the contact tracing capacity we have. And yesterday, 2 days ago, we launched a smartphone app that now has 77,000, over 77,000 users, including me. And it's a free, confidential app that allows people to know if they're in contact with somebody who has been in contact with somebody who has been exposed. This has given us the time to put in place mitigation efforts that allowed us to reopen businesses and begin to go about life as close to normal and get back to life as we want it to be as quickly as we possibly can. So we've come a long way from those early draconian measures that we put into place to buy time. We bought time, and it did help us save lives. Those measures did work. I mean, the University of Pittsburgh just had a study that said that we saved thousands of lives by doing that. A couple months ago, I think Drexel University published a study that said we saved 7,000 lives just in the Philadelphia region alone. So we did some things because we had to, and they worked. But we can do things in a much more focused way now than we could before because we've learned more about the virus, and we can do fine-tuning. So Pennsylvania's stay-at-home order, you remember that? That expired in June, months ago. Since July, all counties have been in the green phase. I mean, we're open. And all businesses have been allowed to reopen. Those business closure orders that we had to do back in the early months, the first couple months to buy time, we don't do that anymore. And all of this is possible only because we've been doing some targeted mitigation that my administration put into place to protect Pennsylvanians in public spaces. Because the bare facts are these: the virus is an airborne virus. We might not like that, but it's true. The virus is also very contagious. We might not like that, but it's true. And it spreads most easily when people gather together. Again, we all wish this weren't the case. I wish this were not the case. None of us asked to live in a time where we have to face the danger and the unpredictability that a virus like this brings with it. But the virus is not going to be changed by our wishes or by our hopes or by any legislation that we might feel that we can pass and make that virus change. We have to take concrete steps to protect ourselves. And so my administration, acting on the best available advice of scientists, of doctors, public health experts, inside government, outside government, we've put into place focused, targeted mitigation measures to protect Pennsylvanians when they're most vulnerable, when they're gathered together. So we've asked Pennsylvanians to practice social distancing, to wear masks, to put limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings. We've required telework where possible and restricted indoor dining capacity for restaurants, all to prevent the spread of the virus and try to save lives. Everything that I've done, that we've done, this administration, has been based on available public health guidance and the most up-to-date research on COVID-19. And we've done it for only one reason, and that is to try to save lives. And our efforts have worked. Pennsylvania right now has one of the lowest daily reported cases per capita when you look at a seven-day rolling average. I think we're 41st in the country. That's one of the ones you want to be low. You don't want to be first. First would be you have the highest number of cases per capita. We are one of the best. The Trump administration, I think many of you were here when Dr. Birx was here a couple of weeks ago, and she gave a press conference, and she said Pennsylvania's doing a really good job. Just on a call 2 days ago with her, and She talked about the efforts that are going on all across the country, and one of the things she mentioned was the stockpiling of personal protective equipment. And she focused on a number of states, I think 20 or so states that are have 1 month or less inventory on hand. And she said, and then there's some good states that have 2 months on hand. And she said, then there are a handful of states that have even more. Well, we're one of that handful of states with even more. We have about 6 months, I think, on hand in every category of personal protective equipment. So we need to continue to do everything we can in these mitigation efforts to prepare for any upsurgence that might take place. That's what we need to do. And yet, the General Assembly, under Republican leadership, has repeatedly tried to overturn the very mitigation measures that keep these case counts low, that have taken Pennsylvania to the place that we are right now. Research has shown that COVID-19 can spread easily in restaurants and bars if proper mitigation efforts are not taken. The CDC, not us, the CDC, released a study 2 weeks ago that showed that patients who tested positive for COVID-19 were twice as likely to have dined indoors at a restaurant as patients who tested negative for COVID-19. But this week, the General Assembly is pursuing legislation that would disregard the warnings of public health experts and eliminate the mitigation measures that keep Pennsylvanians safe when they decide to dine in restaurants. The General Assembly has sent a great deal of dangerous legislation to my desk. Rather than bolstering the Commonwealth's efforts to prepare for a possible resurgence, legislators have repeatedly tried to deny my administration the critical tools I need to try to continue to fight this effort. We're a democracy. There are very few things that we can do to handle tough situations, but the Constitution gives me some power to do that. They seem to have a problem with that. If the efforts that they talk about, tried to push over on Pennsylvania succeed, we're going to lose a lot of lives. This irresponsible behavior simply has to stop. This is not the time for grandstanding. This is the time for doing things that are actually going to help people and save lives. Pennsylvania needs leaders who are going to approach crises like COVID-19 with the solemnity and the care they require. Because all of the progress we have made could go out the window in an instant if the mitigation measures we put into place are allowed to just vanish. The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington published a research tool that models projected cases of COVID-19 in the Commonwealth under different scenarios. And their projections show that if we ease mitigation efforts too far, we could see a doubling of our daily infection rate within 1 month, an exponential increase in weeks and months to come after that. The possibility of a resurgence this fall is a real danger. The second wave of COVID-19 cases, resurgence is already happening in Europe after being under control for much of the summer. And we must assume that the virus is not yet finished with Pennsylvania. If the members of the General Assembly want to live up to the duty of care entrusted to them by the people of Pennsylvania, then they need to stop trying to get rid of public health measures that are keeping Pennsylvanians safe. Yeah, we don't like them. Yeah, it really puts hampers on our lives, but it saves lives. And if they have an alternative, I'm all ears. But all they want to do is dismantle this stuff. We need them to start passing legislation that will actually help Pennsylvanians stay safe and help all of us weather this pandemic. So now let me turn to our democracy. Our democracy was built on the very simple premise, and that is that government should work for the people, which again is quite a contrast to what it's doing right now. The promise inherent in Pennsylvania's founding was that this would be a place where tolerance reigns, where equality is upheld, and where the voice of the people is the voice that really holds true power. When our Commonwealth fails to live up to that promise, to that core principle of democracy, it is to the detriment of everybody in Pennsylvania. When I first ran for governor in 2014, as a novice, as a rookie, first time in politics, the people of Pennsylvania told me all across the Commonwealth that they wanted a better set of leaders in Harrisburg. They told me that their voices were simply not being heard the way things were. They told me that their government cared more about what special interests wanted than what the individual constituent needed. When the voices of the people are ignored, our government is not working the way it should. Pennsylvanians deserve a government that is accountable to them, and our constituents should be the ones calling the shots in Harrisburg. That's why, since day one, I have done things differently. If you'll recall, the first hour after I was inaugurated, I immediately instituted the strictest gift ban in the country for every state employee under my jurisdiction. I instituted a new, fair set of procurement rules so that work being done on behalf of our citizens was going to the best performer rather than the person who knew the most influential people. I instituted new transparency measures to ensure that the public knows what their employees are doing, such as reporting cabinet expenses online. I refused a government salary, and instead I donate my statutory salary to charity, and I refused a state pension. These changes were vital to reestablishing public trust in the executive branch, but we know there's more work to do to ensure that the opinions of our citizens matter more than the whims of special interests. And that's why I'm calling on the General Assembly to stop wasting time fighting against public health measures and join me in fighting to protect the lives and livelihoods of Pennsylvanians. By providing loans and grants for small businesses, by directing funds to support hazard pay for frontline workers, by ensuring that everyone who works in Pennsylvania has access to paid sick leave. I am also calling on the legislature to enact common sense measures to ensure that our government is responsive to the needs of its citizens. And elected officials are held accountable to the people who elect them. This is how we can prove to Pennsylvanians that their voices and their needs truly matter to elected officials. In August, I laid out a legislative agenda for the fall that outlines needed COVID-19 recovery measures. But I also added into that government reforms. The General Assembly has not acted on any of those measures. Pennsylvanians need accountable government now more than ever. So I'm calling on the General Assembly right here, once again, to take action on 3 concrete changes that would improve government accountability and rein in special interests. First, put in place a gift ban for all public officials, not just in the executive branch, that's already done, for all public officials. Second, improve outside income transparency. And third, reform Pennsylvania's campaign finance laws. The gift ban I put into place when I took office only applies again to executive branch employees and officials. It's time that all elected officials in the state are held to the same standards. So I'm calling on the General Assembly, and there are bills out there, to ban gifts for all public officials. Not make small gifts, not say you have to report them, ban them. Gifts to public officials from lobbyists, special interests, and donors are inappropriate. At best, they undercut public faith in government. At worst, they can be symptomatic of unacceptable corruption in the public sphere. Banning gifts is a clear signal to voters that they can trust their public officials and that they are being transparent. Another key to improving public trust is to require that public officials disclose outside income. In Pennsylvania, some public officials earn income outside of their duties in public service. This is perfectly legal. And while it's legal, it's still incumbent on everybody as public servants to uphold the highest standards of transparency. So I'm calling on the General Assembly to require public officials to 1, disclose sources of outside income, 2, disclose the amount of income that they receive, and 3, disclose the type of work that they perform to earn that income. This level of transparency will reassure the public that any outside income that they may receive has no bearing on the public work that officials do here in Harrisburg on behalf of the people who elected them. We also need to make sure that Pennsylvanians know who is spending money on elections for state and local offices and how much money is being spent. Pennsylvania, as you know, has some of the weakest campaign finance laws in the country. Ours is one of only 11 states that has no limits on campaign contributions. And the political action committees can spend anything they want on candidates. There are no contribution limits. It's free rein for deep-pocketed donors and special interests. That's why I'm calling on the General Assembly to pass new campaign finance laws that do 4 things. 1, limit contributions to candidates seeking elected office. 2, implement aggregate limits for races. 3, place sensible restrictions on political action committees. And 4, strengthen reporting and disclosure requirements all across the board. These reforms are needed to restore confidence in government and curtail the role of campaign spending in our political process. We've worked together on reforms like these in the past, and we can do this again. In 2018, I signed a bill the General Assembly sent to my desk to strengthen reporting rules for lobbyists and to increase penalties for late reporting. That bill was a good first step. It was, but it wasn't nearly enough. Partisanship too often seems to be an unconquerable divide for all of us. But we can't let it get in the way of sensible, necessary reform, and we can't let it get in the way of helping Pennsylvanians in times of trouble. The people of Pennsylvania deserve now and have always deserved a government that works for them. They deserve elected officials who serve the public with accountability and with transparency. They deserve to have confidence that their elected officials are listening to them, the people who vote. The people of Pennsylvania should come first, always. And I invite the General Assembly to join me in fighting for those voters and for those citizens. Thank you, and now I'm pleased to turn it over to Common Cause. Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Governor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Suzanne Almeida. I am the Interim Executive Director for Common Cause Pennsylvania. Common Cause is a nonpartisan watchdog organization. We've spent the last 50 years working in Pennsylvania and across the country to hold our elected officials accountable to we the people. I'm here today, less than 6 weeks before our presidential election, to talk about our democracy. Our democracy is out of balance, with elected officials often prioritizing the wants of special interest donors ahead of everyday voters. Our democracy should be by, of, and for the people. Both nationally and locally, things are out of balance. The wealthiest donors have outside influence and access to our elected officials. Ordinary people, the folks that Common Cause works with and for, and our concerns aren't getting the attention we deserve, and we are all paying the price for that. I want to make something clear before we go any further. These reforms are not a partisan question. They're not about Republicans, they're not about Democrats, they're about we the Pennsylvanians, right? These are also not about punishing our elected officials for doing their job, nor are they accusations of actual misconduct. Instead, they are common sense reforms that allow transparency, sunlight, and remove the appearance of impropriety and help restore Pennsylvanians' confidence in our democratic systems. Specifically, restricting large contributions makes candidates more accountable to and dependent on the people, not wealthy donors and special interests. We deserve elected officials that work for we the people, not wealthy donors. Restricting large contributions put the power back where it belongs. Transparency in government is essential to a healthy and a strong democracy. That's why Common Cause works to strengthen transparency laws at all levels of government, from local government up through the U.S. Congress. Secret spending erodes people's trust in government. Transparency, on the other hand, promotes accountability. It makes it possible for voters to make informed decisions, not just about who to send to Harrisburg or Washington, but also about the issues. We fully support measures such as those proposed today that make it easier for the public to see and understand how our elected officials are spending taxpayer dollars. We also know that when our public officials accept valuable gifts, it erodes public trust. That's just a fact. It supports the notion that people are able to buy government favors in exchange for things like, say, season tickets. Conflicts of interest are pervasive in our current system, and a sweeping gift ban would be a meaningful step towards restoring a measure of confidence in the integrity of our institutions. Those proposals that are already in the Pennsylvania legislature are a good step. But if they don't get any movement, if there is no action, then we are just, again, shouting into the void. So I'm calling on our elected officials today from both parties, from across the aisle, regardless of whether you're from Elk County, Montgomery County, or anywhere in between, to prioritize these common sense reforms. We know that 2/3 of Americans, regardless of political party affiliation, believe that, quote, traditional partisan politics don't care about people like me. This is according to national polling. This is clearly a problem. Common sense changes like those we've discussed today will go a long way to restoring confidence in our democracy and putting power back where it belongs, with the people. Thank you to Governor Wolf and your administration for your impressive leadership on these issues. And with this, I will turn it back to the governor.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Now, any questions? Yes. Good afternoon.
With the shortfall that's projected for this year and then into 2021 in state tax revenues to the state, what's your plan to assist counties to getting back on their feet with those projected shortfalls?
Yeah, the state has to work on getting itself back on its own feet. I think the key thing that the counties, the local municipalities, and the state were all hoping is that the federal government, Washington, steps up with the next round of the CARES Act. And as you know, the House passed a bill that was over $3 trillion. The Senate passed a much pared down bill. And as I understand it, up until Justice Ginsburg's death, they were actually in the process of talking about another one that was somewhere more than the $500 billion and less than $3 trillion. But I think the real key is there. In the meantime, I'm doing everything I can to try to make sure that over the next 2 years, our own budget, that we do everything we can to try to shore up where we are. We've obviously lost revenues.
Does the possibility exist of, I believe there's $500 million left of the original $3.6 billion in CARES Act? Is there roughly $500 million left? Is there potential of any of that going to the counties, or is it less than $500 million that was reserved?
I think there's over $1 billion left. I think we've sent out about $2.6 billion, so that leaves about $1 billion. In that original round, as you know, there was a clause that said you can't use this. They called it the non-supplantation clause, which meant that it could not be used by states or local governments to shore up or plug budget deficits. So that really limits the state. So the short answer is no, we can't use it to shore up either our or the budget deficits that local governments have. That really requires a next round of CARES Act funding. Else, all of us are going to be scrambling to find ways to plug that deficit.
Hi, Governor.
Yeah, hi, Jan.
I was wondering, there's a lot to unpack from your comments and trying to have the one relate to the other. And I mean, I was thinking about the debate that I heard regarding the high school sports bill and the restaurant bills that the legislature's discussed. And they said they were responding to what the people wanted. They were hearing the voices of the people. And so I was wondering how you justify calling that, you referred to that legislation as meaningless in your news release. How is that meaningless?
Well, first of all, let's take the high school or the schools bill. The bill specifically said that schools should be given the responsibility for deciding whether they want to have sports. They have that responsibility. That's been clear. I've tried to make that as clear as I can. Apparently there was some misunderstanding about that. The only other thing in the bill that I think we all have to take issue with is pretending that they have the unilateral power to basically suspend that virus, to say, okay, you know, in the past you've really done well when crowds of people have gathered together, and we're going to basically say, nah, that doesn't work anymore. So nobody could put any limit on gathering together. You know, when the Articles of Confederation were in place for how many years, by 1787, the founders figured out this wasn't working because the Articles couldn't make tough decisions. We need a democracy where we can actually respond to crises like this and actually say, okay, we want to keep people safe and we want to actually do something. What we can't do is just sort of do some feel-good law that says, okay, we're going to suspend the law of gravity. We're going to, say that this virus isn't going to infect people. It will. It's out there, and it's waiting for us to do stupid things. We can't do that. That's the kind of thing that instead of looking at that, seems to me the legislature could be dealing with things like hazard pay. We know that we have to do more in terms of hazard pay. We had $50 million the first round. $900 million of applications came in. I'm asking for more money for that. Where's that? We're talking about making our democracy work better. That's what we ought to be doing rather than trying to artificially suspend the laws of gravity or the virus and saying reality doesn't exist. Let's just ignore it. Instead of doing that, instead of spending the time doing that, let's actually put out things that people really need that's going to keep them safe. What they did here, I don't even know what the point was. Anything else?
Governor, that was a bipartisan, passed bipartisan, and they felt the need to have a law. You have recommended limits, 250 and 25, and are fighting to keep that in court. And now we saw 24 Democratic legislators flip. Isn't that a bad look for them to go back on what they had voted earlier? And didn't the original vote show bipartisan support for allowing districts and putting it in place that they could feel comfortable to expand the limits?
I think the Democratic caucus sustained the veto, and that has been something that I've really appreciated in the 5 years and 8 months that I've been here. That they've been in the minority in both chambers throughout that time, and yet they've stuck together so that they have remained steadfast to the extent they needed to sustain the veto. They did it again yesterday.
Doesn't that show a lack of conviction that they voted one way earlier in the month and then flipped their vote 3 weeks later?
I think there's I've been in politics for 5 years and 8 months, but it seems to me there's a difference. You want to do what you can in terms of being sympathetic to your constituents, but in the end, we all have to stick together, and I think the overwhelming majority of Democrats did that.
There does seem to be an increasing number of Democrats who are siding with Republicans on these bills, that the restaurant bill, the high school sports bill. Like yesterday, that restaurant bill passed with a veto-proof majority. Are you concerned about losing support of the Democratic caucuses?
No, I guess, again, this is what I was trying to say. I think I get concerned when we play games and we posture and we play fast and loose with the lives of Pennsylvanians. I thought we were dealing with the things to do with this pandemic, with this virus, and the reality that this virus is very infectious and it has killed 200,000 people in the United States, 8,000 in Pennsylvania, despite our good record. That is something that I think we ought to be really laser focused on. And it has created economic hardships. We ought to be focused on that. We've got $3.6 billion. We still have $1 billion. Let's focus on making sure that when businesses or individuals or restaurants, hotels, whatever, suffer economic consequences because we're trying to keep people safe, that we actually do something to offset it. That's what we ought to be focused on. And I think the fact that there's a lot of extraneous chatter about other things and distracting us from that central issue, I think that's a problem. Yes, it is a wonderful and very seductive thing to look at these things and say, yeah, let's just suspend reality. Let's ignore it, and let's just sort of, hold our ears, close our eyes, and just pretend we can go back to the way things were. Well, we really can't. We've got to acknowledge that the new reality is constraining us, and it's something that we still have a lot to learn about. But we've tried to learn as we've gone along, and the decisions we've had to make are tough ones, and not easy ones. And it's very, I guess, tempting to have somebody say, hey, we're over here and we're saying, let's just go ahead and ignore reality here. Let's do something that just feels good, even though it's going to hurt us. I think that is tempting. And so, yeah, we keep coming back and back to that. But I think most Democrats, or enough Democrats to sustain a veto, and I'm certainly standing fast, that my first priority is to keep Pennsylvanians safe, and that's what I want to do. Yeah.
Governor, the legislature had sought to create a task force among lawmakers, bipartisan, and you. Would that have been a good idea? And could you reach out to them more in negotiating some of these measures?
We've been doing that. As I say, we work together to distribute $2.6 billion So we actually have worked together. So, I mean, I think we've gotten some things done, but I guess I get frustrated as a Pennsylvanian. If I weren't in this position, I'd be frustrated to say, you know, you're being paid a lot of money to do a lot of stuff up here to help me in my life, and all I see is grandstanding. What do I know? I'm a novice. Any other questions? Yeah, did you have it? Oh, go ahead. I'll get you next. Okay.
Governor, we've had folks reach out to us that have made unemployment claims all the way back to mid-May.
Right.
And they haven't seen anything yet. Can you give any clarity on that and where unemployment claims stand?
There are some, but we have done almost, I think we're at 97 or 98%. But that 2%, if you're part of that 2%, then that's inexcusable. We're doing everything we can to continue to follow through in those things. Now, we have had some recent challenges with the unemployment for the gig workers. There's been a big fraud issue. We were actually moving down to, I think our lowest point was 5,000 new claims on PUA a week, and in one day they went up by 40-some thousand in one day. And we're pretty sure that was a fraud issue. Now, a lot of states like California, basically, I think we're second to California in number of PUA claims, and they basically suspended, as I understand it, sending out PUA claims. We suspended for that day, but we continue to try to work through as honestly as we can the PUA claims that are out there. In terms of the unemployment compensation, the big spike that happened, I think we've worked our way through almost all of that. But yes, that has been a real problem, and we continue to. We've added people. We've worked about 300,000 hours of overtime. We've doubled the size of our staff dealing with unemployment compensation, and we'll continue to do that.
Governor, you mentioned grandstanding, posturing from the General Assembly. The Republicans say that part of this grandstanding and posturing comes from these type of events where, news conference, basically governing by news conference. Is there any intentions to meet face to face to kind of go more in depth with some of the leaders in the General Assembly?
We're talking all the time. I mean, I'm not sure. I think maybe you've brought this up before. I don't know what they're talking about. We have a whole department that does nothing but reaches out to legislators on both sides of the aisle. My chief of staff and his staff are working on a daily basis, hourly basis, with working across. Again, we have actually gotten some things done. I'm complaining about the things that they spend time on that they shouldn't spend time on. This is something I do because I think I want to be transparent, and I believe that a free press deserves to hear directly from their folks, and I'm sure they have press conferences too. I don't call that grandstanding. I call that exchanging information. But I also feel that when I see something I don't like, I don't think it's wrong. It's wrong for me to say I think they could do better, and I think they could do better.
Them face to face rather than through your teams might be more effective.
I do that too.
They say that they have not met with
you.
Who
says that?
I would say the House Republican leaders, the Senate Republican
Who says
leaders.
that?
The leaders.
Which leader?
Do you know their names? It's
Brian Cutler. I mean,
Jerry Benninghoff. Jay Corman.
I can't tell you the last time I spoke with them on the. I mean, we're not speaking in person because of the COVID.
When was the last time you spoke to them?
You mean on the phone? I mean, we're not standing in front of each other, but on phone, I don't remember. I mean, they just come back from a summer recess, but it wasn't too long ago. But I have them on speed dial. They have me on speed dial. We have all kinds of opportunities to talk together. I think that's a red herring. That doesn't make any sense.
It's not working.
Huh?
They say the speed dial isn't working, I guess.
Okay. All right. I think we can all agree that's kind of a lame excuse. I have been fairly clear, very clear in terms of what I think the priorities for Pennsylvania ought to be. And if there are any questions, I'm all ears. And my staff is talking to their staff all the time. We're talking through the legislative affairs folks, meeting daily, hourly. So I'm not sure what the concern is. That seems to be sort of pretty tough for me to buy. All right, thank you very much.